Hey, y'all. It's good to be hanging out with you today. This conversation stems from something that came up in one of our groups. And it said, hey, if you could give one piece of advice, what would you give? If you could oversimplify this, a big part of this journey, and just say one thing to people, what would you say? And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Welcome to Beyond the Facade podcast. I'm your host, Luke Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you join me in this space today. What we're going to be doing is diving deep into the trials and triumphs and truths of seeking authenticity. Becoming your true self isn't about a single action or moment. It's a relentless pursuit, a commitment to self that reveals the rich connection and meaning that our life has to offer. So whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a regular listener, know this: what you're building here goes beyond a conversation. You're here to challenge, to change, and to celebrate the incredible journey of becoming your authentic self. Because when you dare to show up fully, the rewards are immeasurable. So welcome to Beyond the Facade. Let's get started.
So in the group, somebody said that what was one piece of advice that you could give? And this is way oversimplified, but there's some real nuggets and some real gold in here that came from somebody else, not me. And they said, just do the opposite of what you think you should do. Just whatever you think you should be doing, do the exact opposite of it. And that leads into a conversation I want to have with you around change and how it works for humans and how we experience change. And I think Patrick Carnes does a good job defining what change looks like and recognizing that it comes in layers and stages. And the first one that I want to talk to you about is the one that we're the least aware of, or at least I'm not hearing people talk about when they come to me for the first time. And at least that they have awareness of the fact that this is a stage of change. And we call that the development stage. And that's the stage where that individual is trying over and over and over again and have not been successful. Now, I can picture a lot of people going, yeah, I see that as like a stage of change, or I've recognized that. But check this out. That can also include that you're trying over and over again with a therapist or a coach or a group. But that's still development stage, because if you're in the development stage, it's half-hearted attempts. Now, I feel like you're going to want to smack me if I said that. And then we'd all of a sudden realize the development stage, or you all of a sudden realize development stage is where you're at. Because half-hearted is probably a word that's used to maybe not necessarily embellish, but not necessarily honor the hard work that's going into change. But it's where the rock bottom comes into play. I see I have a problem and I'm making attempts, but I'm controlling so much. I'm going to give you an example of that. Actually, let me talk about the next stage of the journey. And that stage, by the way, can take a long time. It can take years. Patrick Carnes defines it like 0 to 2 years. And I can appreciate that, because that basically sets us up to go, yeah, it'll last a while where we take countless attempts. But we're not talking about just trying by ourselves. It's trying and still trying to maintain control. So I'll give you an example of themes of men that I work with. Probably the easiest one to recognize is a full disclosure. The partner who's been hurt, the betrayed partner, says, hey, I need truth. And I heard about this full disclosure process, and can you give it to me? And he's like, no, I don't need to. You already have truth. Like, I'm not going to do it. And so he stonewalls and says, I can't, I don't want to do that. And then let's use this as a scenario to talk about this. Maybe he comes to somebody like me and says, hey, what about this full disclosure? And then you can tell there's this part of this shut down, even if they're talking about it like, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me because I already gave it to her. And there's this, and I hope you can hear this, there's this control aspect that still exists for them of, no, I'm not open to that, even though there's a conversation that's happening. And that's the half-hearted attempts that we're talking about. That's the not complete commitment to letting go of the outcome and saying, hey, I recognize my own thinking has got me here. And if I just do what I think's best, the way that my thinking works, if that's in play, it means that next stage of the journey, which is called the decision stage, the crisis stage, isn't in play yet. So let me define what the next stage of the journey is so we can tie this development stage together. This is one where the individual can no longer tolerate the addiction because they feel so exhausted from the process of trying to change. And they feel, I can't do this anymore. And then there's that catalyst that sends in that new direction. So this actually happens in the journey. A lot of people think that's like, I get caught. And they're like, I can't do this anymore because my partner found out and I'm in so much pain. No, that's not, you're not technically ready for change yet because you were caught. Crisis/decision stage, that one is like, I can't tolerate this anymore. This is too much. I need something different for me. So we have a full disclosure with a man that goes, I don't want to do that. That sounds horrible to sit down and create and to give a full accounting of all my sexual behavior for a duration of a period of time. He goes, I don't want to do that, but I recognize my thinking isn't really got me to a really good place. So help me understand why that would be important. And there's this process of letting go of the outcome and saying, I'm going to think about things and process them in a way that I haven't. And then I'm going to allow myself to do things that I haven't done before. And that's comes from being so exhausted from not being able to change on their own. And I can't do this anymore, which is I have to have this for me, not for somebody else. Now, it's often identified through other people's pain because I'm in denial and I can't see things. So other people will point things out to me that I can't see yet. So again, this comes in layers. You have that development stage and you have the crisis stage/decision stage. And now the person on their way to change. Okay. By the way, that crisis/decision stage, it takes 1 to 3 months to really, 1 day to 3 months to really move through that stage. And I recognize that timeframes aren't always helpful because it can be different than that. So I just want to put that out there. So just bear with me on timeframes, but if you add up all these time frames together, we can have a good conversation about this. So we'll come back to that at the end if I remember. The next one we have is the shock stage. That's the third stage where the individual's absorbing the reality of how bad things are. They're now not using numbing coping behaviors. It's out of their system, out of their life. And now they're like, no, nothing to numb them up. Now they're feeling the full extent of the injuries. It's like, oh my gosh. I see the reality of how bad things are because I'm coming out of denial. And that takes the range there is like 8 months of being in the shock stage. So by the way, if you're in the shock stage right now and it feels like you're there for a long time, like this is really, really bad. This stage takes a little bit of time. Then we have the grief stage, which is where that individual has that profound understanding of the losses of pain. So there's been enough process and the lack of numbing behaviors, coping behaviors, the grief sets in. And it's like, wow, loss, pain. Different than shock. It could hit at another level, a more visceral level of just like, and that stage lasts about 4 to 8 months. The last 2 stages, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, y'all. The last 2 stages of the repair stage, and that's the one that everybody, including myself, and it's not fair for me to say everybody, thinks they're in. So it's where that person begins to reconstruct a new life, and they work with change and how they interact with themselves and with other people. In that stage of repair, 18 to 36 months, all right? And I want to say that, like, I'm in a repair stage because that sounds great, right? Compared to saying, oh, I'm in the development stage. I'm still making attempts, but I'm still controlling. Or I'm in the shock stage, or I'm in the grief stage. Everybody just wants to get to the repair stage. And then you have the last stage, which is the growth stage. That's like the last 2 years and beyond, where there's like what we're working for here. It's not a destination, because that's why it says 2 years and beyond, where there's a new relationship because that person learns how to be open with themselves and with others. And there's not that quest perfection. It's not about being perfect. It's not about not making mistakes anymore. It's about being open and vulnerable. So going back to the full disclosure process, I think about the gift that is possible for the person that did the betraying in that relationship to not do it out of compliance, but they go, I'm doing this because it's the exact opposite of what I think I should do. Because my brain doesn't want to do change, but I need something different. I want something different. So I'm going to recognize that about myself. And I don't know how and why I did this, but a long time ago at some corporate environment that I worked at, we'd have to come up with mottos for ourselves. And I used to be in sales. And it was cheesy, but we did these it's not cheesy. It's actually kind of fun. Kickoffs to the first of the year, and we'd say what we wanted to accomplish and what our theme was. And I decided mine was going to be chase the fear. Wish I would have applied that to intimacy instead of just work. But it was like, I basically do everything that scares the crap out of me. And there is this part of the brain. Oh, shoot. Am I going to be able to remember this? The anterior cingulate cortex. And this part of the brain basically gets bigger or smaller based upon the person that does things that they don't want to do. So people in the military or sports where they're just put in environments to do things to push themselves supposedly beyond their limits and to lean into pain, that part of their brain's really big. And I think about this change like, man, that's anterior cingulate cortex. Must have been really small for me. I'm not trying to make fun of myself, but I'm picturing like pea size, right? Like I just didn't do things that were painful, that didn't make sense to me. So that year I was like, okay, chase the fear. Anything that scares the crap out of me, that's what I'm going to do. When I was only with work, again, I wish I would have been recovery and intimacy and my behavior and other aspects of my life. But that's a really valuable thing that we can be doing is just leaning into doing things that we don't want to do. And that's not something we can do on our own. It's not like we can just show up today and go, okay, I'm just going to do this on myself. There's accountability with this. There's telling people about what we're going to do. People that can validate us, cheer us on, challenge us in those things that give us a new perspective, that gives new things to look at. In fact, I want to share my friend Sai. He's a coach here at Choose Recovery Services. And he told me that today, it was interesting. He said he does these, he's been on, I think, 2 podcasts ago. He does these 100-mile marathons, ultra marathons. You go for 100 miles. It takes a day. I don't remember the exact time. And he told me the last couple that he's done, he was left with like, yeah, I could have done better. And at first my response was like, dude, like he ran an ultra marathon. Is that like shame talking? And I know Sai, so these were split second thoughts before I looked at what I know about him. But I'm like, is that a part of you who's like never going to be happy with what you can do? And then there's a part of me, and then I thought about it for the next week and I've still been thinking about it. And he said, I just don't know my own limits, Luke. I don't know what I'm capable of. And I recognize every time I go, I'm actually capable of more. And I'm like, so that set in. And I'm like, that's so cool. Chasing the fear, chasing the things we're uncomfortable with. The best thing we can do when it comes to this change is ask ourselves, what can't we do? And go, what? What do you mean I can't do that? What do you mean I'm not capable of that? And put ourselves in environments where we can talk about that. Talk about the things that feel impossible. Anyway, those are stages for change. So that's the one piece of advice. It's not about me giving advice because I'm not the expert of other people's lives. They're the expert of their lives. So take it or leave it, whatever it's worth for you. But yeah, just do the things that you don't want to do, the things that don't make sense. That will challenge and create patterns, new patterns, and will break old patterns.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this is something that you connected with, I'd love to meet with you more and talk about it. So what you can do is go to chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes. And there what we can do is set up a quick conversation to meet. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Facade, where we unmask the authentic self.